Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to talk here today. I came from a meeting yesterday in Johnson County where I've learned the definition of faith. You know what the definition of faith is? Your father gets up, he does his weather recommendations, and he says, it's going to snow, even though it's 65 degrees and sunny outside. That is a true definition of faith right there. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Hopefully you have faith in what I'm telling you today on the variety selection side. We're going to cover what the OVT is doing right now, what our current status is, what we're doing to get data for you, and then we're going to go through some opportunities using the variety selection tool to find that data that's specific to your operation. First, before we start, I'm curious, how many of you, if I asked you today, could tell me the names of varieties that you used last year? Raise hands. You could tell me what varieties you used last year. Nobody knows the names of the varieties they used last year? Okay. Those that raise your hands, take it a step further. Can you tell me why you put a variety on a specific field? Maybe not. That's where I want us to get to. I want you to understand and know why you're putting a variety or picking a variety for that specific field. There's a reason. There's an opportunity for you to get a higher return on investment by making that choice, but we need to find the data that makes sense for us. Now, what are we doing in the OVT? We're your filter. We're an unbiased data source for varieties and hybrids within the state. These are the numbers of varieties and hybrids that we tested last year, almost 400, from 41 industry and university sponsors. We cover just about all the available sponsors, all of the available companies that are selling varieties within the state, a little bit over 90%. So we're looking at a lot of different genetic material. Not only are we looking at a lot of genetic material, we're looking at it across a wide diversity of environments. So 17 locations. This is actually increased. We did 14 locations the year before. We did 17 last year. We are by far the largest state variety testing effort in the Southeast. And outside of maybe Texas, we're probably the largest in the country. The reason for that is I want to give you, as growers, data that's valuable to you. The more locations I can test at, the better understanding we have of how varieties fit to a specific environment. For you here in the coastal plain, you have two. Here in Lumberton, or Robinson County, sorry. You have full season double crop location that we plant every single year. You have local data to help you make that decision. You also have data across the coastal plain, multiple locations, I think 5 or 6 total, to help you understand what varieties fit for your specific soil types. So one of the largest data sets that we generate is in soybeans. We have about 10 locations in corn, about 7 locations in wheat. All told, we have a lot of data that we can look at. Not only can we look at specific fits of varieties, but we can look at trends. And this is kind of interesting to me, particularly as big as the soybean data set is. So you take 140 varieties, 17 locations, rep 4 times, you have about 10,000 plots worth of data. And I can start asking questions. And this is the first question I ask is, what was the better maturity group by planting date last year for us in the OVT? You can see we represent up here, full season, we were about 82 bushel, double crop, we were about 73 bushel. We actually had the highest yielding year for the OVT in the last 7 years. This is a very good yielding year for us in soybeans. Same story was true in corn. So we had an opportunity in full season by about 8 bushels. We can break that down a little bit further. How did that break down by maturity group on full season? You see group 4s had about a 2 bushel advantage compared to group 5s, and about a 4 bushel advantage to group 6s, and another 4 down to group 7s. How many of y'all have heard Dr. Vans talk about her maturity group by seeding rate by planting date test? You've heard that, give that data? What does she say about planting? What's your best opportunity for maturity group planting full season, April or May? What maturity groups? She says your best yielding opportunity in high yielding operations, planted full season, so mid-April to mid-May is a group 4, group 5. And that's trending out for us here in this data set from last year. We can break that down even further. We can look specifically at the coastal plain. Now here, we average about 77 bushels compared to 92 in the Tidewater and about 82 in the Piedmont. Here, that trend's a little bit flatter, particularly between group 4 and group 5, and then it starts falling off when we get to group 6, group 7, okay? Sandy soil environments, we saw about an equal yield advantage between a group 4 and group 5, and then it fell off once we got to group 6, group 7. Now for coastal plain, this is Bertice County, Sampson County, and then Robinson County for full season. We can split it the other way. We can look at double crop. You see any yield advantage there outside of maybe a jump up from a group 4 to a group 5? Not really, they're fairly flat. And this also kind of matches with what Dr. Van sees on double crop planting. Planting in June or later really doesn't matter from a group 4 to a group 7 what you plant. You get about equal opportunity for yield. We see that in our OVT data, anywhere from about 70 bushel to about 74 or 75. I can break that down even further. Here you are in the coastal plain. Your opportunity actually from our data last year was in a group 6 or 7. You had about an 8 bushel advantage or a 7 bushel advantage from group 5. The group 4s, I think we were dry early on when we planted our double crops. We just did not get the yield advantage on a group 4. For you here in a sandy soil environment, from a 5 to an 8 was really where your sweet spot was last year. That may or may not track with what you saw in your own operations, but that's what we saw in our data. So we're going to look at trends in maturity group by planting date. We can also look at trends by trait. So what I have here is the yield, the average yield across the different traits that we tested last year. The numbers you're seeing here are the number of plots that we tested per trait. So obviously the majority of our plots were Enlist or Enlist STS. Extendflex and Extendflex STS. Those are our primary traits that we tested last year. For the most part, fairly equal yield across. You see this one, it's a little bit above for Extend STS, but we only looked at 56 plots, so it's a little bit skewed. But overall, if you look at any trend, you really don't see a huge yield advantage or disadvantage from using any kind of trait within our data set. So, lots of data. I mentioned before we had about 10,000 plots of soybeans this last year. Added all told, we had almost 16,000 plots worth of data that we generated last year. Now, it's great to generate data. It's even better if I can get it to you in a usable format, one that you can look at and understand. We had some pretty good buy-in last year from growers. We had about 39,000 data views. We had about 800 unique users every single month looking at our data. So it was about a field day or 8 field days worth of data, or growers looking at our data every single month. So that's a good pull-in, but how are we doing? How are we generating data? How are we getting it to you as growers? 2 ways. I want you to think of me as the Walmart of data, of soybean or variety data. If you want to go buy a TV or some clothes or some food or whatever you want, you can get the data that way. So first and foremost, all of our data is on our website, ncovt.com. If you're used to the green book, you like that data table look that you used to have, you can find that here. You can find data tables or reports that we generate out of our variety selection tool. And you can find Excel files. So if you'd like to kind of look at the data, you want to sort it yourself, you can download those actual Excel files and look at it that way. You have those opportunities for those that like looking at those data tables. This is what one of those looks like. This is for a group 5. We split our group 5s into early and late. This is full season. This is what we call a location summary table. Data here is on the left, statewide, and then I've got it grouped out. It obviously goes further than this, but I can only put so much on one slide. Grouped out by location. Anything in a green cell is in top yield group, so not statistically significantly different from the highest yielding variety. So you as a grower can look at what did well statewide, you can look across, you can look for your specific location here at Robinson, and whether it was in a green box or not, or how often it was in a green box is important to you. We can also do reports out of the variety selection tool, same type of look. This is group 4 full season for all the varieties. Again, ranked by yield statewide, but then we do some breakouts looking at percent trial mean across the different regions. I'll talk about here in a minute why I'm using percent trial mean, but this gives you a quick look at how these varieties fit, how they worked, and then how they would fit for your specific environment here in the coastal plain. So those opportunities exist within the OVT website. You can look at those data tables really quick, get you a quick start to how you want to find the varieties that fit for you. I'm here to talk about the variety selection tool because this is really, I think, where we're headed moving forward. This tool is our comprehensive database of all of our variety results from 2018 for beans, 2018 for corn, and 2014 for wheat to the present. So what this does for us is it allows us to collate all this data together, which allows you to search for different varieties, compare different varieties, filter for specific traits or companies or however you want to look at your data set, something that you can't really do easily just looking at static data tables, okay? The other thing it does is it answers a question I've always had. Well, Ryan, you don't have an old variety that I grow right now. I don't see that in your OVT data set. Well, going back to 2018, we have older varieties that we're not necessarily testing anymore that we can compare back to, right? So we can look at older varieties, we can filter, we can look at by year, we can look at specific interactions. That gives us our opportunity with this variety selection tool to really fit that selection to what you're looking at as a grower. This is what the variety selection tool looks like. Again, it's hard to tell, but it's a collated database with all of our variety results, both by location, by single year, and then by multiple year, all in the same area. All told, I want you to start thinking about making variety selections this way. This is a model we developed a couple years ago. I want you to start with 3 and 2 year OVT data. I want you to start there because it's your best predictor of how a variety is going to perform on your soil type, okay? It's your best predictor, is that 3 and 2 year data. Now, I want you to make a selection out of here, but I don't want you planting your entire acreage in that one selection. I want you to split up your acreage. No more than a quarter to a third do I want in any single variety. And you know why? It's a risk exercise, right? Dad's pretty good about weather predictions, but he does get it wrong every once in a while, whether the snow prediction works out or not. And some years that doesn't fit or work for specific maturities. So we want to spread out our risk by planting multiple maturities and multiple groups or varieties within this group. I don't want to stop here. I don't want to stop here because we're always looking for newer varieties. That variety you've been growing for 5 or 6 years is not going to be around 4 or 5 years from now. You need to be ready for the next line that's coming through, right? You need to get some use to how that line of varieties can perform for you because you've got different management practices than I do. And maybe it'll work differently for you. So I want you to look at this single year statewide OVT data. I don't want you to plant a large percentage of your acreage, maybe 10% at most, because it's really a trial. It's really a way to look at a variety, how it fits for you. But I want you to make the selection with some supporting information. How did it do in my location? How did it do in Robeson County? Did it do well in Robeson County or not? How did it do in Mac's strip trial data? Mac's got some information from the county data that they put together. Did it do well in those data sets? Talk to your industry rep, talk to your seed dealer, talk to your retailer. Do they have data that shows that it did well that can support that selection for you, okay? So we're gonna make a lot of our selections here. We're gonna drill down and do some selections here so we're ready for those newer varieties as they come out. In all elements here, I want you to be thinking about how this fits for me. Whether it's a sandy soil because I'm in a coastal plain environment, or maybe I have a river bottom and I need to think differently about how that field's gonna be treated with a different variety, okay? I want you to be thinking about variety placement because I want you to be able to answer the question I asked you before. Why did you plant that variety on that specific field? They have fits, they absolutely have fits, but why did you make that selection? So when I talk about variety placement, I'm really talking about fitting a variety or hybrid to a specific environment or grower management style, okay? 2 different elements here. Me as an OVT, I fit in this first bucket. I'm looking at a lot of different varieties across a lot of different environments, whether that's soil type, soil characteristics, how the weather does. We collect weather data from temperature to water to how much rainfall we got. We can start looking at trends of how they responded to different amounts of rainfall. So I'm here in this bucket looking at how they respond to all those different environments. There's another bucket that exists, which is management, how they respond to nitrogen. You heard the talk with Dr. Hawkins early on. He had a really good talk about how they responded to chicken litter or broiler litter. You had a good example there. What did you need to do? You need to select for a shorter variety, one with better standability. I can't really answer this question. I'm already doing 16,000 plots here. If I try to answer all these management styles and practices, I'd be doing about 10 to 100 times that number of plots, and it's just not possible. What we'd like to do is take these higher flyers that work for our environment, push them down to these management tests that Dad, that Dr. Van, that Dr. Post do, and we can get some answers to how they respond to these different management practices, okay? So 2 buckets, environment and management. And then we capture phenotypic characteristics where we can, from disease to nematode to insect resistance to plant height and some other characteristics. These are all the elements you're thinking about when you're making that selection, okay? It's gonna start with yield, because yield's important, but there's gonna be other elements that go into making the selection at the end of the day. Why do we care? Why don't we just pick the highest variety that's on the table, right? Why don't we just pick the highest variety and just go with it? Well, we care because there's a return on investment that you don't recognize by getting that specific fit. Now, you don't see this because you're not planting hundreds of varieties. You're planting 3 to 5 or maybe more, right? You don't necessarily see that that specific variety fits better than others. I'm planting hundreds. I can identify across 17 environments across multiple years, I can identify where those varieties fit because I'm planting a lot of them. So I'm gonna do an example here. This is ASGO 54XF0. We've got 3 years of data on it. You can go to the variety selection tool. You can type in, this is the dashboard for soybeans. You can type in any variety you want into the search feature. You don't have to type the whole variety name, just a couple of digits, and it'll take you to that variety information. If I'm using the variety selection tool on my phone, this is what I use it for. It's limited screen space, but I can look at how specific varieties did. I went to a grower's field for a wheat meeting, He said he had the specific variety. I was able to type it into the variety selection tool on my phone. I could tell how it fit by specific environments just on that single look, right? So we can type that in, this Asgrow 54. Here's a QR code for those that want to follow along and see the specific page on their phone, if it's able to read this. But you get a landing page with the variety information, so whether a picture of the variety from our plots, a link to the company tech sheet, some attributes about the variety itself. You can click on this trials button right here, and that'll take you to the trials information for that specific variety. And it gives you all the data for that variety from as many years as we've been testing it. Here it's splitting it out by region, so coastal plain, Piedmont, and Tidewater. Coastal plain predominantly sandy soils, Piedmont predominantly clay soils, Tidewater predominantly organic or silt loam soils, okay? Think of it that way. The thing I want you to focus on are these means down here. So the yield that we had for that variety across all 3 years we tested it, the trial mean yield, so the yield of all the varieties in that test, and then how much better or worse this variety did compared to the mean. So what we're asking for the percent trial mean yield is really asking, if I took this variety versus a random selection out of the varieties that I tested, how much better or worse did it do, okay? Higher percentage better, lower percentage worse. Does that make sense? That's the question we're asking. Now the reason I'm focusing on percent trial mean is because there's differences in yield. You have the same soybean yield last year as you had this year? No. Do you have the same soybean yield here as you would out west or even out east? No, there's differences. And those differences will skew if you're looking at raw yield levels. If I'm a grower here in the coastal plain, and I'm making a variety selection based off of raw yield, because we have yields that you saw earlier that are higher in Tidewater or higher in Piedmont, my selections are going to get biased towards both of those regions this year, right? Same for years. It's going to get biased based off of the yield level for a year. When we look at percent trial mean, this standardizes that yield across years and across locations. You're looking at apples to apples now, and you can determine fits. I don't know how easy it is to see. It's a little bit fuzzier here. So you're looking at a 7.5% trial mean for a coastal plain for this variety, 2.4 in the Piedmont, and 6.9 in the Tidewater. For me, I'm looking at anything higher than 3%. 3% higher is good for me, okay? Well, there's differences here. There's differences that exist from the coastal plain, the Piedmont, and Tidewater. So let's break that out a little bit more. Over here on the top, same variety we've looked at. I've got the percent trial mean listed here. I've got the yield of that variety here, and then the trial mean yield itself over the last 3 years. There's your yield differences in green. I'm plotting it to 11.85 bushels, $11.85 bushel, and that's what your return on investment is, okay? This is a difference in you choosing this variety to grow on your operation or a random variety. How much better did I do by choosing this variety versus just having a random variety chosen for me? In general, you did pretty good in the coastal plain, almost $50 per acre. A little bit better in Tidewater, almost 70. Not as good in the Piedmont, only about 21. Compare and contrast this with the NK line. Now, both of these are very strong varieties, very strong. I'd recommend either one of them. Look at this NK variety over the last 2 years. Where does it fit based off of what we just talked about with this Asgrow variety? Piedmont. If I'm a grower in the Piedmont, I'm going to make this selection, aren't I? Probably over this Asgrow variety, just based off, and now this is 2 years of data versus 3. I will tell you, I looked at the 2-year data on this one, and the trends are exactly the same. But based off of this information, I've got a better return on investment or better opportunity by selecting this variety if I'm on those clay Piedmont soils, don't I? Now, what's your difference for you and the coastal plain? Any real big difference? About $8. It's about the same. You know, you're within reason, you're about the same here. You're identical, actually, if you're looking at Tidewater soils. Well, this is what I'm talking about. This is why it's important. We don't think about this. We think about we're growing this variety and we got a yield. And we can compare that to the 3 or 5 that we grew, but we don't know what our opportunity was or existed outside of those 3 or 5 we tested. This is why I don't want you looking at just that top variety, because there's other varieties within that table that are going to fit for you, I promise. Whether it be from availability or pricing or just a straight yield piece, there's going to be a better fit for you based off of where you're growing these varieties. All right, so let's dig into this, to the variety selection tool itself. Now, I've got slides on the variety selection tool we'll start with, but at the end of this, I would really like some feedback from you as far as criteria you want to look for a specific variety, okay? I'm going to at least get the motor started, get the pump primed a little bit by talking about what I would do if I'm not given any criteria. If I had a grower come to me and said, I want the best full season soybean or the best double crop soybean, what do I need to look for? And I'm going to use Dr. Van's work. She's done a lot of good work with that maturity group by seeding rate by planting date test. And her work showed that if I'm looking at full season soybeans planted between mid-April and mid-May, group 4, group 5s are my best opportunity. So that's what I've done here. This is just a filter screen out of the variety selection tool itself. I've asked it planting timing. I just want full season data because we have double crop data in there as well. I just want maturity group. It says 2 values selected, but I've chosen group 4, group 5. If I had left it open, you would have not seen this part of the top of the slide. And I want anything more than 1 year of data because I want to start with what? 2 and 3 year data, right? I want to start with multiple year data when I'm making my selections. I'm going to drill down to single year data, but I want to start with multiple year data to begin with. You may or may not be able to see these numbers. Don't worry about necessarily the numbers. Look at the colors. So green is our highest. From dark blue to light blue is above average. When you get into these yellows and dark yellows, you're below average. When you get into a red, you're at the lowest, okay? Just focus on the colors if you can't see the numbers right now. This is all of our data from 21 to 23, so 3 years of data. I can actually increase this to 6 if I wanted to. As many years as I want to look at, I can look at. I've sorted just the coastal plain. So you see this little arrow going down. This is the coastal plain only for percent trial mean, going from highest to lowest. I can do this. I can look at regional looks within multiple year data because I have enough data there. It's more than just one single location I'm looking at. I'm looking at multiple locations. So I feel good that it's not just a 1 year effect or one location effect. I'm looking at multiple years of data here. And I'm sorting it by coastal plain because that's where we're growing, right? Now, if you had a silt loam soil or you got a river bottom that's high organic, you may want to sort it by the tidewater. If you got a clay soil, maybe you're further west of here to get some clay soils, maybe you want to sort by the Piedmont. That's where those field effects or those field fits come in. But predominantly, you're going to have a lot of sandy soil types. So I'm going to sort by coastal plain here. The Y's here are the number of years that we tested it. It's going to be anywhere from 2 to 3. So you got a lot of good options there. I can't read them from here, but I'll show you a slide here in a minute that has them listed out. Now for me, I'm just looking at top 15. You can look higher more or less than you want to. This is really up to you, how much you would want to look into this. I'm just focusing on top 15 for brevity. Again, my floor here is about 3% or higher. I actually went a little bit below. My floor here is about 2.6% on my lowest. But top 15, I think, gives you a pretty good look at the options that you have available to you. Again, I'm going to take that a step further. I'm not just going to stop with multiple year data. I'm going to look at single year data as well. Same thing, group 4, group 5 full season, the same filter we had before. The difference is I've now sorted from high to low just on this 2023 data. So single year data, high to low. I've taken out the filter where I said I don't want less than 1 year of data, so I've got all of my data in here. And you can see I got a lot of different options here. I actually go down to about, this is 5.4%, but we got a lot of good percent trial means here. The boxes are the ones that replicate from that multiple year data slide that you saw before. What I'm doing here is I'm looking for what did well, but I'm also looking at the coastal plain, right? Because remember, I'm not just taking the single year data and going with it. I'm trying to support it as much as I can. I want to know how it did in the coastal plain. Do I see any yellows here? If I don't see any yellows here, I feel pretty good. I see a teal or a green, which is important because that's highest, so I feel pretty good about that option. But I'm looking for yellows. I can take this a step further. We can't do it right now, but we can do, maybe we want to go into the tool. I can slide over here to Robeson and see specifically how it did for Robeson County because I want to support those selections I'm making in that 1 year data set. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, the boxes are ones that replicate from the multiple year data set. I know you couldn't read it, so I went ahead and typed it out for you, but these are the top 15 multiple year. These are the top 15 single year. There are more varieties than this available, particularly in single year, I promise, but I had to limit it to some level. The ones in red are the ones that are the same between the multiple year and single year, so if you're making those selections, you feel pretty good because they've replicated this last year based off the weather we got, but you have a lot of good options here across multiple companies, across multiple varieties, across multiple traits. Now, what have I made this selection based off of? The only criteria I've used. What is the only criteria I've used to make these selections? Yield. I've only used yield. I've not made any selections based off a trait. I've made no selections based off a company. I've made no selections based off of disease. So yes, I'm going to start here. These are my top 15, but there's other things I can do to sort within this data set to figure out, okay, I may have frog eye that I've seen a lot. I want a frog eye resistant variety. Maybe I've got some root knot pressure, some cyst pressure. I'm going to look for a cyst-resistant variety, right? All I've done is start with yield, but this is your starting point. Now we can start filtering even further to find the ones that are fitting based off disease, nematode. Dr. Hawkins mentioned I've got some varieties that behind litter, right? I don't want a shorter stature variety because I don't want it falling over. Now we can start looking for that within this data set. But based off of yield, this is where you can start with. So full season. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's do double crop. Dr. Van says planted in June, anything from a group 4 through a group 8 works for me, right? Good yielding environment, anything from group 4 to group 8. We saw them are the OVT data, at least from last year. That's just single year data, but really for you in the coastal plain, that 5 through 8 was a better opportunity. I've got double crop sorted. I'm looking for 4 through 8. I chose all the maturity groups, and then I'm looking for, again, more than 1 year of data because I'm going to start with multiple year data. Now, when I go to look at single year data, this is the filter I'm taking out because I want all the years of data that I'm looking at. But I'm going to start here, okay? Again, multiple year data here on the right. I'm sorting based off of coastal plain. You see a lot of different options there. Those eagle-eyed of you in the room can probably pick out some newer varieties that we didn't see in the full season set. You can probably pick out the fact that we have group 4s, 7s, and 6s and 5s all in the same area when it comes to yield opportunity. And again, I'll show you a list here in a minute so you don't have to look and try to figure out what those are saying. Again, here we're looking at highest to lowest within the coastal plain because we have enough data to look at that. Top 15, and then I'm taking it to single year data. Again, I'm looking at sorting by total, so statewide. But I'm looking at this coastal plain to make sure I'm not hitting any yellows because that may be a red flag for me if I want to try to grow it in a sandy soil environment. It may have shown that it didn't do as well as some of the other varieties in that same environment, okay? That's the list from that look. Again, top 15, reds are correlated between multiple year and single year. Now, I don't know if y'all have noticed up here, do I have traits other than extend and enlist on here? I do. I have at least 2 conventionals on there, if not 3. What we found in our data set in the coastal plain is conventionals are very competitive in the coastal plain environment planted late. So you have some good opportunities for conventionals there, but you've got good opportunities across a wide variety of companies' traits. Again, all of these are based off of yield. I've got to make more selections. So maybe I don't want to grow a group 4 full season. So I'm going to take out the group 4s that are in here. Maybe I'll filter it down to group 5, group 6. Maybe I don't want to grow extend or don't want to grow a conventional. I got to take those traits out and look for specific traits that are important to my operation. Does this make sense? Kind of all on the same page of what we're looking at for this variety selection tool and the power within this tool that provides us.
So let's do a little quicker dive into what we can do with the tool itself. So when you first come onto the variety selection tool, you're going to be given an option of what crop you want to look at. For purposes today, we're going to look specifically at soybeans. So we click on this soybean icon. This is going to take us to the dashboard for the tool. Within the dashboard, you have 4 different options of what you can do with the database. You can look for specific varieties with find variety. You can query for a set of varieties based off of different characteristics like yield level, test weight, disease resistance, traits. Using query variety, this will give you a list of varieties based off of those criteria. You can compare multiple varieties together to see how they perform compared to each other using compared varieties. Or you can look at the data as a whole in this OVT data module. More often than not, you're going to be using this OVT data module because it most closely matches with what you're used to looking at data tables on the website or looking at the Green Book back in the day. So we're going to click on this OVT data module. This initially loads in some options for us. We've set it so that we can pre-filter for specific maturity groups. So you can look at either maturity group 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 and 8 only. This hopefully makes it more streamlined. So if you want to look at a specific maturity group, you just have to click on the maturity group of interest, and that automatically filters the data to that maturity group for you. For my purposes, I'm going to use custom. Custom will allow you to do whatever you want with the data, set your own filters, add in your own criteria. So we're going to click on custom here. I mentioned in the presentation that I really like looking at percent of trial mean. So I'm going to have percent of trial mean selected here. I'm going to click on this filters so I can see what filters I have. I've got some preset in here already, so I'm going to go ahead and eliminate these filters that I already have, and I'm going to rebuild my database. And as you can see, you have a lot of different data in here already. Starting on the left-hand side here, this is our single location data for 2023. As you can see here on the left, there's a scroll bar down here on the bottom. So we use the scroll bar to scroll right. We can look not only at single location data for the coastal plain and Piedmont, but now we can also look at statewide data for 2023 across different regions. So the Tidewater, coastal plain, Piedmont, and then for statewide overall. And then we can scroll even further to the right here, and we can look at the multi-year averages. So 21 through 2023 across all three regions and statewide. You're going to notice that, again, I'm looking at percent of trial mean because of what we talked about earlier. You notice that we can sort these different fields based off of whatever criteria you want. So right now, this is sorted highest to lowest based off of multi-year statewide data. So this 10.3 is the highest percent trial mean for this Integra line. Going all the way down, you see a Y and an L number. This is the number of years, number of locations that this variety was tested at, going all the way down. You can click on the header here. So you can click on Piedmont and sort by that. You can really sort by any criteria that you want here. Now, teal, this greenish color is going to be the highest value. Dark blue to light blue are going to be your above averages. Whenever you see a yellow, that's below average. And if you were to see a red, that would be your least value, your lowest value. So when I'm doing some data selections here, initially I'm going to look for, okay, I'm in the coastal plain. So we're looking at multiple year data. Now you notice that we've got a lot of Y1s in here, so we've got a lot of single year data. So I want to filter that out so I can just look at multiple year data. So I can click on filters over here where it says select data field. I can click on that and I can say, okay, I want years. So I can type in years and it says number of trial years. So that's what I want. And I want anything that's greater than, so greater than 1. So I want anything over 1 number of years that was tested. And I'm going to click filter down here at the bottom. This is going to filter my data. It's going to take out only 1 year data, and it's going to give me all the 2-year data. Okay. So I can scroll back over here to the right, and now you can see that there's a lot of Y2s here. You don't see any Y1s because we've taken out the single year data. I want to start here. Remember, we're starting with multiple year data. I'm going to sort by coastal plain because that's the region I'm interested in. I can do that in multiple year data because I've got enough data here to feel confident about how that variety is going to perform. You can see I got a lot of different variety options. Now I'm not filtered by maturity group, so there's all the maturity groups in here. If I wanted to filter by maturity group, I just have to hit this plus icon here. And then I can select what maturity group I want just by typing in maturity. There's maturity group. It's going to say no value selected. I click on this, and then I can select the maturity groups I want. Again, for us, we're going to probably look full season at a group 4 and a group 5. So we're going to filter that. Now, remember when we talked about full season or talking about searching by group 4, group 5, we're mostly looking at full season. Again, this is all the data in here. So we want to filter that out to just full season data. So we're going to add another filter option. We're going to tell it we want planting timing. That's already showing up here, but we could type it in like we did before. And we can tell it we just want full season data. Okay, so now we filter this database 3 different ways. We told it we want more than 1 year data. We want different maturity groups. In this case, we want group 4 and group 5. In this case, we just want full season data. We're going to filter that, and it's going to take us to where we want to look at. This is the power of this database. We can filter and search for specific data we want instead of having to look through all those different data tables like we've had in the past. You notice now I'm sorted over here statewide multiple year. I want to sort by coastal plain, and there we go. I've sorted by coastal plain. And these are some good options here for varieties that we can use in the coastal plain. Again, full season planted, group 4, group 5. What I do here is I look across. So, coastal plain, we're thinking sandy soil environments. What if I've got a river bottom? So if I've got a river bottom soil, higher organic soil, or maybe even silt loam soil, that's more of a tidewater environment. You can see here that maybe that, like this USG line does really well in the coastal plain. Maybe if I get it on these high organics or these silt loams, it doesn't do as well. So I want to be cognizant of how these varieties are performing, not only just in my region, but maybe even across regions. If I have some clay soil types, I'm going to look at Piedmont and see if they did well, if they're in that blue category, if I've got some yellows or I've got some whites here on the right-hand side. Okay. So that's what I'm doing when I'm doing these selections. Remember, we talked about starting with multiple year data, but also trimming it down to just single year. We can do that very quickly. I can keep my maturity groups and my planting timing already set. I just got to take out this number of trial years filter. And I can do that by clicking on this X button. Okay. Now I just got 2 filters. I refilter this, and now it's going to bring in all that single year data that I took out previously. Scroll back over to the right. All that single year data is now back in. Now I don't want to filter here, or I don't want to sort here in the multi-year because I want to look at just single year data, single year varieties. So I'm going to sort here statewide. I don't want to sort by region here. I want to sort just by statewide because I don't have enough data to sort by region. Instead, I'm going to look how it did statewide. So a lot of green to a lot of blues here. Now I'm going to pull across the coastal plain. Am I still seeing greens and blues? In fact, I've got a green here. I've got this Heiniger line that did really well in the coastal plain. It did well statewide, but it had a really good fit in the coastal plain. Okay, that might be an option for me. Let me click on that to select it. And let me pull it across to Robinson. I'm in Robinson County, so let's see specifically how it did in Robinson County this year. It did pretty good, 5.3% above trial mean. So I feel pretty good about how that variety could perform in my environment. And that might be an option for me for a variety selection for this coming year. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just looking and seeing, okay, what are my options statewide, what perform well statewide, and pulling it across to the coastal plain to make sure that they still performed as well in those coastal plains, and then confirming if I have an environment in Robinson County or another county that makes sense or where we've tested. Okay, so that's the baseline for what we're using the database for. We can take it a step further. You know, I've sorted by maturity group, I've sorted by full season. What if I've got a specific trait package I'm interested in? So let's say I want to look at specifically enlist soybeans. Trait. Helps if I can spell trait. I'm going to do trait package, and I'm going to tell it I want anything with enlist or enlist STS. Maybe this is a herbicide or management program that I've decided to invest in. I want just these soybeans. So I can filter this and make this even more concise search. Okay, now I'm just looking at enlist. Again, I'm looking at group 4, group 5, and I'm looking at full season planting, and I can do the exact same exercise I just did. I can pull across, look at my single year averages. Okay, now of course I've got a more limited list because I'm just looking at enlist, but I've got options here that did well in the coastal plain, did well statewide. And again, I can pull them back across to Robinson County and say, okay, if they did well there, do they do as well in Robinson County? And maybe we have some better options here. Maybe this NK line would be a good option. Okay. This is the power of the database. The power of the database is to be able to take all that data and filter and search for specific things that you're interested in, whether that be by soil type, by trait, by company even, and look across environments, look across coastal plain environment, look across Piedmont and Tidewater, and also look at locations and see if they match, because that's really the power of making this selection for you as a grower. So I hope this has helped, and I hope that you're able to use this data, use this variety selection tool to find those varieties that will fit for your operation.
So the good news is, I'm going to go back to this presentation. The good news is you don't have to do all this yourself. We have a strong extension service, and I credit them for the position we are with this tool right now, because with their support, they've been able to talk to you growers, help you find those varieties that fit best for you using that data from that tool. We have also started what I call an active data distribution model. So every time I release data in corn, wheat, and soybeans, I have a webinar where I talk specifically about that data from the previous year. I hold that on Zoom. It is not a variety selection tool training, but I use the variety selection tool for making those decisions. And I literally walk through every single region, top 10, top 15 varieties based off the criteria that those growers have that are online with me. These are the dates that we held those meetings this last year. Soybeans was in January. I try to get these done before your early order deadlines. I can hit that for wheat, I can hit that for corn, I cannot hit it for soybeans. I got too many planting dates, too many regions, too many locations. So we have to do that in January. I know it's like telling you who won the Super Bowl last year, and I apologize for that because you've already made your selections for the most part. But my hope is it gives you an idea or a thought process in making those selections for the coming year, right? Because you can use the same kind of criteria. We talk about the variety testing OVT results. These videos are all recorded, so if you search NCOVT on YouTube or use this QR code, it'll take you to our OVT YouTube channel. If you're bored and you want to get to sleep one night, put one of these videos on. It'll do the trick, I promise you. I have some of this most boring, dry content on YouTube. If I could only monetize it, I'd be doing pretty good. But these are available. If you've missed these webinars, if you're like, I don't know what this kid talked about when he said variety selection tool in corn and soybeans, go to YouTube channel, spend a couple minutes, and we walk through kind of what that data looked like from the previous year. The other strength you have is your county extension agent. Mac is a good champion for this, and I really do appreciate his work in supporting us. Go to Mac and tell him the same criteria you just told me here today. I want a group 5, group 6 in a specific environment, right? He's gonna be able to go in that tool in what, 5, 10 minutes, Mac? Maybe longer, 6, 10. He can pull that data for you. You know, you can just tell him, email him, text him, say, I want, this is my criteria. I want group 4, planted full season, what are my options? And he can pull that data for you. If you get into this variety selection tool, you cannot break it, I promise you. It'll break on its own. You cannot break it. Try it out. Just try it. If you get confused about it, that's okay, but you're gonna find some nuggets in here that I've not talked about here today, and some different ways of looking at this variety information. I've got some take-homes here today. I want you to start looking at percent of trial mean instead of raw yield. Yes, raw yield is what pays the bills. Percent trial mean is the road to get us there, because that tells us how those varieties performed against any random selection of variety that we've had, at least in our data set. Here's our floors. If we're looking at percent trial mean, 3% or better in multiple year data, 5% or better in single year data. Again, please do not plant more than 1/4 to your 30-year acreage in a single variety. We are playing a risk aversion game. As much as we can spread that risk out or minimize that risk, the more success we're gonna have. And the way we spread that risk is by planting multiple varieties. In the case of soybeans, multiple varieties and multiple maturities. So that we're set for when that hot, dry weather period hits us, which it always will, okay? Use the multiple year data for the majority of your choices, because that's your best predictor, but always be using that single year data so that you're ready for when those old tried true varieties go by the wayside. And I promise you they do. I promise you. I've watched more varieties that I've counted on go away than I can ever count. If you have questions about how to use the tool and you're not sure, your county agent can generate a report template for you. As an example of what this looks like. I made this for Robeson County a couple years ago. This was a selection of maturities the grower had, wanted high yielding, high test weight. They didn't have any disease preferences. They didn't care about planting date. This is in corn, obviously. I was able to get them a selection of about 12 to 13 to 14, however many they wanted to look at. And they can take this selection, they can go to their seed dealer, their seed rep, their retailer, and say, hey, these are the ones I'm interested in, this is why I'm interested in them, okay? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out why we want to plant that variety to that specific field. That's all I've got. Does anybody have any questions about the OVT, our variety selection tool, or how we've been distributing data? All right, thank you all.